Our What If series continues on Orange and Blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason with a conversation about Bruce. What if the Denver Broncos signed Bruce Smith in 1989 as a free agent?
Yeah, one of the all-time players, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the all-time great pass rushers. And back in 1989, in March 89, the Broncos were hot on the trail of Bruce Smith. This was before the modern era of free agency, so it would have cost them 2 first-round picks if they'd gotten Bruce Smith. But it reached a point where the Broncos gave an offer to Bruce Smith. But, of course, the Buffalo Bills had the right of first refusal when it went from there. But the Broncos' primary offseason task is they were 8-8, getting ready to start the Wade Phillips era as defensive coordinator. He just replaced the late Joe Collier. They wanted Bruce. They wanted some Bruce bad.
Mm-hmm. You want me to put up that graphic about their offer?
Yes,
Broncos?
there it is. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the stories from March 1989. $7.5 million over 5 years. That sounds quaint today.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, it's big money outside of football. I mean, for any of us, it'd be big money.
Yeah.
But back in those days, $7.5 million over 5 years. His signing bonus would have been $500,000. His salaries would have been 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6 over the 5 years of the contract. And as was said by Dan Reeves at the time, then the Broncos coach, quote, "We think we can justify this contract because we consider Bruce to be one of the top 2 defensive linemen in the league. Our scouting department tells us there won't be anyone of his quality coming out of college in the next 2 or 3 years." They wanted Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith, his first name starts with B, but as the Broncos went into 1989 trying to get back to the Super Bowl, he was plan A.
Yes. And Dan Reeves with Bruce Smith, that would have been something, Mace. But there's a price to pay.
Mm-hmm.
There's a price in all of this. Our little twist, the lemon twist. Because this is where it's not a would you rather, because if it was, I know what people would pick.
That's easy. That's very easy.
Mm-hmm.
But who came to the Broncos in 1989?
Steve Atwater.
A Hall of Fame safety.
Mm-hmm.
How did he come to the Broncos?
Picked him.
If they signed Bruce Smith, they wouldn't have had that pick. So if you sign Bruce Smith, you say goodbye to Steve Atwater.
Ooh. No thanks.
Here's what's interesting. As it worked out, the Bills, they had 7 days to match the offer, and of course they did. So Bruce Smith was on all 4 of their teams that made the Super Bowl in consecutive years, from Super Bowl 25 to Super Bowl 28. When the Bills matched, a little detail that was in one of the stories, not on the first page here. You see the headline there: the Bills decide to keep Bruce Smith, and then a quote from Dan Reeves in there: "From the time we made the offer, we fantasized about Bruce Smith."
Wow.
Oh.
The caption says Bruce Smith, 1 in a million.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And Dan Reeves said, "We're going to check into everything at that time." It was suggested elsewhere at the time the Broncos should have given more than $7.5 million. They should have given $8 million, as that column from the Colorado Springs Gazette-Telegraph notes. So anyway, Dan Reeves, in that story there's a quote: "The worst thing would be to go through all this and not get Bruce Smith," unquote. Well, they didn't get Bruce Smith, but they began formulating a plan to get Darrell Green, the Hall of Fame cornerback from Washington at the time.
Right.
That didn't even result in an offer, let alone a chance to get him. But think about that for a moment. The Broncos trying to upgrade their defense in 1989. Bruce Smith was plan A. Darrell Green was plan B. Plan C was Steve Atwater.
Wow.
Steve Atwater, who are there more than two Broncos from the team's history who are more beloved? I'm not saying like great player because like you probably say like Elway Manning, but more beloved by the fan base than Steve Atwater. Like
everybody loves Steve.
Everybody loves Steve. Everyone who comes across him, he's got a smile for everybody. He's a genuinely warm person. Like he played one way on the field and then he's a different person off of it, right? Like
smiling assassin.
Smiling assassin. He's ambassador for the franchise to this day. It's hard to imagine the Broncos as an entity without Steve Atwater being a part of it, and yet it very nearly didn't happen. So let's take a what if here.
Butterfly effect.
Yes, it's 1989, and
what did Atwater go, about 15 that year? What pick was he? 12, 15, somewhere in there? Because of course people are like, is he a linebacker or is he a safety? He's both.
Well, it was a little controversial at the time because a lot of people thought Louis Oliver was the better safety in the draft out of Florida. Mm-hmm. Louis Oliver went 25 to the Dolphins. Steve Atwater went 20th to the Broncos. Right after Wayne Martin, a defensive end, went to New Orleans. 2 picks before Andre Rison.
That's a hell of a draft, by the way. If you collect football cards, you know about the 89 Fleer set. Like, you know what's in that collection of cards.
The top of the draft, 4 of the 5 picks at the top of the draft became Hall of Famers. Troy Aikman, then Tony Mandarich. That was the miss, number 2 overall to the Packers. Barry Sanders went number 3 to Detroit. The late Derek Thomas, number 4 to Kansas City. Deion Sanders, number 5 to Atlanta. Poor Tampa Bay won 2 of its final 3 games the previous year and picked 6th and got Broderick Thomas. Another reason why I say if you're out of it, just lose. It's okay.
That's fine.
Like that okay. Again, lessons little Mace learned before he became a teenager. I was 12 years old, and you try to, as a Bucs fan, I try to talk myself into Broderick Thomas, but it's like Barry Sanders, Deion Sanders, Derek Thomas, the 3 previous picks. Oh my gosh!
Right.
Wow.
Right. So,
but anyway, so yeah,
they surrender their pick. That means Buffalo has it, right?
Buffalo has the pick. Buffalo has pick number 20.
Let's start with this then. Does Atwater give them one of those 4 Super Bowl titles? Because we'll just assume Buffalo would take him, right? Maybe he wouldn't, and he falls, and the Dolphins take him instead. But like, would Steve Atwater have made the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl champions?
Ooh,
I can't say for sure. But this is a butterfly effect. Like, things would be different if Denver didn't have Steve Atwater.
The question is, if you're Buffalo, where is that pass rush coming from?
Right.
You'd lose him, but you'd have 2 first-round picks. Now, the question also is, what would happen with the Broncos? Would the Broncos have still been a Super Bowl team in 1989? If Bruce Smith replaces Steve Atwater? Yeah, I think they are. Even though you're changing how you get there, who's playing where, you're basically putting in a great player at a premium spot in a premium task, rushing the passer. And he would have flourished for Wade Phillips. There's no doubt. Like, I think the interesting thing about this, Cease, is the impact is more profound on the teams than I think the players. I think both the players are Hall of Famers regardless.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Shoot, if Steve Atwater goes to Buffalo, maybe he doesn't wait until the 2020 class. That I think is something interesting to look at, because again, if you're taking out one great player and putting another great player in, you're sort of mixing up, shuffling the deck a little bit in terms of where that performance is coming from. But he would have been impactful. The question is, would he have pushed them over the top and gotten them to a Super Bowl win? That I don't. Man, didn't Bruce Smith have a safety in Super Bowl 25? If I'm not mistaken.
Is that the one against the Giants?
Yeah, the one they lost by 1 point. I mean,
Okay.
the problem with Steve
Herman
Atwater,
Thomas should have been MVP in that game.
yes, but Bruce Smith. So that safety that puts the Bills up 12-3, who's getting it?
Right.
I mean, the rest of Buffalo's defensive line, they were 3-4, was Jeff Wright and Leon Seals. So with Buffalo, start here. How are you finding that pass rush? Because the other thing that could happen is, what if Buffalo, they lose? And I think this is actually the interesting what if here. Buffalo loses Bruce Smith, but they're like, we got to replace him with a defensive end.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
The pick at number 21, right after Steve Atwater, was Bill Hawkins. And if you're saying, whoo, well, there you go. Bill Hawkins, 5 sacks in his career, all rookie in 1989, only played 4 seasons in the league. Huge at the University of Miami, but he had a knee injury late in his rookie season. He was never the same after that. And then where does Steve Atwater go? Because it's possible Bill Hawkins would have been the Bills' pick. And then now you're talking about changing something here because you don't have the same quality. And where does Steve Atwater go? Where does he go?
Well, if Miami took the safety, Oliver,
yes, so this is
Atwater would be.
And this is what could happen. Of course, the other thing, Lewis Oliver went to the University of Florida. There was a lot of pressure to pick Oliver. In fact, a lot of pundits thought Oliver was the better of the safeties, better than Steve Atwater going in the draft. So
Miami still passes.
And then you get to the San Francisco 49ers, okay? They picked a linebacker named Keith DeLong out of the University of Tennessee in 1989. The thing about the 49ers, of course, is that this was a team that would be patient, and they would pick a guy even if he wasn't going to be an immediate contributor. Here's the thing, though, okay? The 49ers at safety, you know who they started in Super Bowl 25?
No.
A guy named Chet Brooks. Their safety core that year is Jeff Fuller, who had a neck injury and then got hurt. That ended his career. And they had Ronnie Lott, Chet Brooks, Tom Holmoe, who eventually became an athletic administrator. The Niners could have used the safety. The 49ers at number 28 in the first round picked Steve Atwater.
Wow. Ronnie Lott, Steve Atwater.
Oh, my God. So it's Super Bowl 20. It's Super Bowl 24. Broncos lose 55-10 anyway. But you put Steve Atwater in there. Oh.
Whew.
I'm going to say it's 62-10 because at some point that safety combination is part and parcel of forcing a takeaway that goes in the other direction.
Right.
See, the only thing missing from the 49ers' destruction of the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 25 is a defensive touchdown.
That changes with Steve out there with Ronnie Lott. And correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't Ronnie Lott and Dennis Smith college teammates?
They were both at SC, yes.
Yeah. So now you get that same flavor of Dennis Smith, Steve Atwater, but it's Ronnie Lott, Steve Atwater. Oh my God.
Oh,
Dennis
God.
Smith is fantastic because Steve will always tell you, like, it doesn't happen for him without the influence of Dennis Smith.
Dennis Smith,
Ronnie Lott.
Dennis Smith is a classic Hall of Very Good player, as Peter King would say. Steve Atwater is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Okay. Here's the start. Steve Atwater is a difference maker the following year for the 49ers. Instead of losing to the Giants in the NFC Championship game, they win. And they go to Super Bowl 25. They don't see Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't make it. Okay. Buffalo doesn't make it without Bruce Smith and without Steve Atwater. Miami wins the division. Miami gets the number 1 seed. Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins go to Super Bowl 25, and it's a rematch of Super Bowl 19, 49ers Dolphins.
Kind of want to say Marino gets one, but I don't see how. If the
not against the secondary that's got Atwater and Lott.
Right.
The
Dan
Niners
Marino still doesn't have a ring.
Yes, the Niners. Well, let's play this out here. The Niners win Super Bowl 25. They become the first 5-time champion. They also become the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. So, but what's going on with the Broncos? Okay, good question. Unfortunately, as we've said, I think they're on the business end of Super Bowl 24 with Bruce Smith. Now, they don't have a first-round pick in 1990, but in reality, they wouldn't have had anyway because, remember, they used it on a supplemental pick in 89 to take Bobby Humphrey. Bobby Humphrey's not on the Broncos in 1989, but they get their running from a variety of sources, end of career Sammy Winder, that sort of thing.
Where's Gaston Green at? He's still
he's
in the league. He wasn't with the Broncos yet.
Gaston Green's still a couple of years out. Looking at the running backs later in the looking at the safeties and the running backs later in the draft, because the Broncos would have probably had to look for one with the picks they had. I'll give you a solid player that they would have ended up with. Now, they picked Darren Carrington in the 5th round, but I'm going to say the Broncos in the draft at safety later on. Running back again, I think they figured out with the cast of many that they have. At safety, I'm going to tell you that in the 2nd round, instead of taking or the 3rd round, instead of taking Darrell Hamilton, a tackle out of North Carolina, I think the Broncos take Bubba McDowell.
Okay.
Bubba McDowell becomes a really good player in the NFL.
Solid player.
Really solid player for the Houston Oilers. Played 6 seasons there, 1 season in Carolina. So he becomes a pretty good safety working with Dennis Smith. So strangely enough, in the short term, I don't think we've changed the arc of the Broncos with Bruce Smith for Steve Atwater. I think 1990 is much the same. Let's get to 1991.
Okay.
In San Francisco, Steve Atwater is operating without his good buddy Ronnie Lott. There was the Plan B free agency then. The Niners chose not to protect Ronnie Lott. I think they still would have done that. I'm like, okay, Steve, it's your show now. Back there. You've had a couple of years with the great Ronnie Lott. You're going to guide. In 1991, Buffalo still hasn't figured out the pass rush. They're still hoping for Bill Hawkins. They didn't make it to Super Bowl 25. They are, they're very good offense, but they don't have that pass rush punch, that oomph. The Broncos have Bruce Smith. So The Broncos get the number 1 seed in the 91 playoffs, and they go back to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
So here we are. Broncos are in the Super Bowl for the 4th time in 6 years. They're facing Washington, which for 1 year, an absolutely dominant team. Does John Elway still get hurt in the AFC Championship game?
Let's say no.
Okay. So John Elway leads the Broncos into Super Bowl 26 in Minneapolis against Washington. But you got Bruce Smith.
Bruce Smith against the Hogs and the team. And we've discussed this before.
Well, Bruce Smith went against the Hogs in reality.
Yes.
And wasn't a difference maker in reality with Buffalo.
Right.
So is he a difference maker in this alternate universe? I'm going to say probably not.
Even with Wade mixing things up?
Yeah, not against that offense. I think that, again, and also don't forget, I mean, you've taken Steve Atwater out, you're putting Bubba McDowell in. McDowell wasn't bad, pretty good player, but you were going against a team that had 3,000-yard wide receivers, the posse that Washington had, Gary Clark, Art Monk, Ricky Sanders. The Broncos lose a 5th Super Bowl and a 4th under Dan Reeves. Ugh, man. This really gives people a complex.
Very much so.
We've kind of done some what ifs on and we've talked about how if the Broncos in 1996 had gone to the Super Bowl and lost the Packers, if they'd had that 5th Super Bowl and lost as a franchise and John Elway's 4th, what would have come next? Well, now we're moving up the timeline. This is happening in January of 1992. John Elway has been the losing quarterback in 4 Super Bowls.
And Dan Reeves is already wanting to push him out in reality because the Washington trade almost went down. So it's like, now that would be accelerated. It always comes down to coach and quarterback, and then sometimes coach versus quarterback. Reeves will be pushing even harder to get rid of Elway.
The question is, where does he go? We've talked about the scenario if he'd gone to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
But you think that trade is happening after Washington just beat Denver in the Super Bowl?
No.
Even though it would be wild. That's a wild scenario, by the way, to think about. Like, if you revisit that and say, okay, Mark Rippon just won Super Bowl MVP, but he's about to be sent to Denver. Oh, man. What if that happened?
That would be wild, but what would Elway be thought of with another loss? You know what I mean? Like, how much of the shine would be away from his name? Obviously, his game is outstanding. Everyone would love that, but he would have that stank. He would have that reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Can't win the big one. Kirk Cousins, right? Can't win the big one. Can't win in the brightest moment.
Kirk Cousins doesn't even get to the big one. John Elway at least is getting the big one. They're not winning. But John Elway becomes the first 4-time Super Bowl losing starting quarterback. Not Jim Kelly, John Elway. Meanwhile, in Buffalo, they're trying to figure things out. Because they're a good team, but they haven't gotten over the top. What if you have a Jim Kelly for John Elway trade?
Maybe. Would they do that though? Because they haven't figured it out yet with Jim Kelly. Would they give Jim more time with the K gun? Right? Like,
or do they say we're trying to press some buttons here? But also the other thing is maybe Buffalo's not thinking about it, but Dan Reeves picks up the phone and says, "Do you want John Elway? Hey, Marv, do you want John Elway?"
Mm-hmm.
Marv Levy, Bill Polian, do you want Elway?
Maybe Dan Reeves would trade him to the Colts. The Colts wouldn't draft Jeff George.
Or, oh man.
Because he wouldn't go in the division. So I'm thinking of like Payne, right? Like, where's the conflict at? He wouldn't go to Kansas City or whatever. But like, Payne for him would be actually getting traded to the Colts. Like, what does he do then? He can't use baseball. I don't think he could use baseball at that point. 9 years into his career.
He'd say he wasn't. The Colts wouldn't make that trade. They'd be like, no, we're not. You know, we've been burned.
The guy
We're
that
not.
said no, right?
Yeah.
We'd rather have Jeff George. Good luck.
That's why I think.
Oh no, I know where he'd go.
Where?
I know where he'd go. He'd go to Atlanta. Run and shoot John Elway in the run and shoot. Mike Pritchard catching passes from John Elway.
Atlanta having had a pretty good season the previous year, but they won a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, there would be the reluctance to trade him even within the conference, but Atlanta's outside the conference.
Mm-hmm.
What
about New Orleans? You know, hell of a defense. Vic Fangio with those linebackers. Because what was it? Bobby Hebert.
Bobby Hebert.
Yeah, get him out of there. John Elway goes to New Orleans.
Okay. I'm actually going to say Atlanta for this reason.
Okay. All right.
Part of the deal is Chris Miller, who just got the Falcons to the divisional round, to a wild card spot divisional round. Chris Miller, an eventual Bronco, comes back. You know, there's a couple of first round picks involved in Chris Miller, right? Yep. John Elway, Atlanta Falcons quarterback, running the running shoot. Oh my.
Oh my, indeed.
But here's the problem for John Elway running the running shoot in Atlanta. What division was Atlanta in at the time?
Oh, God. Refresh my memory.
The NFC West. Who's in that division? San Francisco.
San Francisco.
With Steve Young now at quarterback and Steve Atwater, the commander of the defense. Steve Atwater is making John Elway's life a living hell. In those two games every year. The two guys who together won a couple of Super Bowls, now they're battling it out in the NFC West, and Atwater's on the side that's getting the better of John Elway. But Atlanta, instead of having two losing seasons in 92 and 93, they're good. They're going they're winning 10, 11 games. They're legitimately competitive.
Yes.
So, 1994 comes around. Deion Sanders ultimately chose to leave for the 49ers. Are the Falcons doing enough to where he says, I'm staying here with John Elway?
Yep. John Elway keeps Deion a Falcon.
Okay. So, look at that season, and Deion was a difference maker for the 49ers that year in getting Steve Young his championship.
Mm-hmm.
But now Deion's a Falcon, not a 49er. And John Elway, of course, is a Falcon. He's throwing at Andre Rison and Mike Pritchard, and the footballs are flying.
Michael Haynes out there.
Okay. Jerry Glanville, by the way, is still the coach. He doesn't get fired after 93.
Elvis still has his tickets waiting.
Yeah, Glanville doesn't go into broadcasting. He's still stalking the sideline there in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. And Brett Favre is learning behind John Elway.
Yes.
Think about that. Atlanta could build something if they have Elway and then Favre in the wings.
Do the 49ers and Falcons meet in the playoffs? Or does that 49er team without Deion Sanders lose to the Cowboys in the playoffs?
Yes, they lose to Dallas.
Okay. So so we have Dallas and Atlanta for the NFC Championship.
Yep.
Who wins?
I want to say Elway wins.
I think so too. John Elway and the Falcons win a shootout. Very similar to what the NFC Championship game with the 49ers and Cowboys that year actually was. the Falcons win a shootout. I'll even say the same score, 38-28.
Okay. So Elway gets back to the Super Bowl.
With Atlanta against San Diego.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
John Elway's got a Super Bowl.
Yes. The Chargers are arguably the worst team to ever make the Super Bowl.
Right. What is the Stan Humphries, right?
Against a Falcon team led by Deion Sanders and John Elway. And they give Atlanta its first Super Bowl. And actually, its first major championship in anything because the Braves hadn't won the World Series in Atlanta. It's the breakthrough moment for Atlanta as a sports town. It's the breakthrough moment for John Elway. It's John Elway saying, I got the monkey off my back. Not Steve Young.
Yes.
John Elway and the Atlanta Falcons win the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, what's going on in Denver? Okay, well.
So Denver has not won, and they just saw their guy leave and go win a Super Bowl. Talk about a complex.
Dan Reeves is fired for trading John Elway.
Yes.
Like gone. He coaches. So just like in reality, after 92, he's gone.
But is he followed up by Wade? I would say no.
Well, here's where it gets interesting because you're starting to get, they're not high picks, but you get a mess of picks, right? In other words, you've got enough picks to work with as you go into the drafts of 93 and 94. In 93, you stand pat with Chris Miller. Chris Miller's fine. But injuries start to catch up with him. And in 94, you're sitting there, you've got, you're still working with a pick surplus. Instead of going 9-7 in 93, you go like 6-10. Okay. People are getting upset. People are getting frustrated. Wade Phillips' seat is very hot going into 1994. And it's a year with a couple of quarterbacks going pretty high. So the Broncos trade up and take a big-armed but not incredibly mobile quarterback out of Fresno State by the name of Trent Dilfer.
Okay.
I don't like where this is going.
I know. It does not look good.
No, it does not look good. Except in 1995, here's another thing. The Niners don't win the Super Bowl, but they're still a really good team. This does not change Pat Bowlen coveting Mike Shanahan.
Yes.
Okay? It's just that Mike Shanahan doesn't have a Super Bowl in San Francisco on his ledger, but he's got all the other things. Well, I'm going to correct myself. In 1992, I'm going to go back here. Mike Shanahan does have a Super Bowl, but it came in 92. The Cowboys don't win it all in 92.
Okay.
The Niners do, and they beat Buffalo. The Niners with Steve Atwater at safety. Steve Young got his ring. He just didn't get it in 94. He got it in 92. So there's no monkey off his back because he's only been it's like, oh, you won it all in your second year as a starter. Good for you.
They're a machine.
It's no big deal. And so the other thing that's happened with the Cowboys is they win it in 93. They don't win it in 94. We're not talking about the Cowboys as a potential dynasty. In fact, as the 95 season begins, we're talking about the Cowboys being pretty desperate to get at least one more out of this window.
Right.
Which is why.
And the Cowboys don't get Deion in 95.
Ooh, see, I think they do.
Deion's staying in Atlanta.
No, I think they do. I think because Deion left the 49ers for the Cowboys.
That was on a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah.
Did he have a 1-year deal?
He had a 1-year deal.
Him and Elway get a Super Bowl.
But here's the other thing that happened at the time. He'd been traded from Atlanta in baseball because he was two sport guy. He had been traded from the Braves to Cincinnati. So he no longer they get through 94. He gets the Super Bowl for the Falcons, but ultimately,
would the Braves trade him away if they got the first championship in Atlanta?
The trade was in early 94. It was before the Falcons would have won the Super Bowl in this timeline.
Okay.
So I'm thinking Dion still leaves for Dallas because also you've got the salary cap. And the other thing that's working against you here is you have a salary cap. Atlanta's owners are, let's just say they could be a little cheap, the Smith family. Okay. Not incapable of success from time to time, but sometimes Rankin Smith was his own worst enemy. And he's his own worst enemy here and lets Deion Sanders go. What that means is John Elway in Atlanta is a one-title quarterback.
One and done.
One and done. He plays out his career in Atlanta, but we'll go further down the line here in a couple of minutes. Okay. So the Broncos, they have Trent Dilfer, but they have Mike Shanahan coaching Trent Dilfer. And it starts to click. Dilfer had some natural talent. Sam Weich's similar philosophy, but a different style, was the wrong coach for him. Mike Shanahan proves to be the right coach for Trent Dilfer.
It's all about fit, even in 94.
So, and by 1996, you start to see the results happen. Without Steve Atwater, they never quite figure out safety. Dennis Smith is retired by now. The Broncos don't, they don't run roughshod through the league and get the number 1 seed in 1996. They do win the division with a pretty solid 11-5 mark. They do still lose in the divisional round, but it's not as the favorite. It doesn't have the trauma of losing to Jacksonville. And with a young quarterback, you come in, you feel different. It's like, okay, we got this third-year guy. We got Mike Shanahan. You still have Terrell Davis. A lot of the pieces still kind of fall into place because you've still got some of the same people. Rod Smith still becomes a Bronco because that's Bob Ferguson's still with the team in 94. The scouts are still doing their work. The Broncos actually look really similar to what they have. But the 1997 season comes, and it's very much, let's get this done for Bruce. Bruce Smith becomes the cause in 1997 for the Broncos.
Okay. And
they bring in Neil Smith. But here's the other thing. Remember I said the Falcons could be a little bit cheap? So things happen there. And also in San Francisco, it gets interesting too. Because the Niners get into a cap crunch. All right? Mike Shanahan remembers his old buddy, Steve Atwater, from the 49ers. They've got to make some moves. Steve Mariucci's coming in as coach now for George Seifert. The big Broncos free agent move in the spring of 1997 is Steve Atwater coming to Denver. Steve still comes to the Broncos.
Okay.
Gives some leadership on defense to join Bruce Smith. It is more of a defensive-oriented team. A little bit more tilt to the defense than it was in reality. But riding Bruce Smith and Steve Atwater playing well that year, and Trent Dilfer continuing to grow into the offense, and Terrell Davis running all over people. The Broncos roll through the AFC playoffs. They get their revenge tour, and they go to the Super Bowl. The Broncos are back in the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 32 against the Green Bay Packers. Dilfer doesn't play well. He's a passenger, just like he would be in reality when the Ravens.
Right, for the Ravens, yep.
He is a passenger on this bus. Terrell Davis is driving the bus. The defense is driving the bus. The game plays out differently. It's not, but Davis still gets the big touchdown run The Broncos go in front by 7, but it's not 31-24. Again, it's a little more trench warfare in there. It's like it's 23-16, maybe even 20-13, something like that. Bruce Smith and Steve Atwater and company have shut down the Packers. And it's time for the big moment. It's 4th down. Who's going to make the play? The same guy who made the play in reality.
John Mobley.
Yep. John Mobley. Steve Atwater knocked himself out on the previous play. The Denver Broncos, with Trent Dilfer at quarterback, Bruce Smith at defensive end, Steve Atwater at safety, win Super Bowl 32.
Wow.
But like most defensive-oriented teams, it's a 1 and out. They don't go back to back. They don't go back to back.
Does Elway wind up in 33 with Atlanta then? Is he still with Atlanta?
Well,
Do they
Dan
somehow
Reeves
get past Minnesota?
Is Dan Reeves the coach of the Falcons? No. It's June Jones succeeds Jerry Glanville. Right. June Jones running the offense. June Jones is the coach of the Falcons. And Elway's nearing the end. They've got one for John, but they want to get one more, right? And they storm through the playoffs and they make the Super Bowl, and they don't see the Denver Broncos. Instead, they see the New York Jets. On one side, you got John Elway going for his second. On the other side, you got Bill Parcells and the Jets going for the chance to make Parcells the first coach to win 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams. Because Bill's gone. What's happened with Bill is, Bill in this universe still went to the Jets after going to the Patriots. Parcells cooks up a game plan that confounds the running shoot. And the New York Jets and Vinny Testaverde and Bill Parcells win Super Bowl 33. And instead of walking out a winner, John Elway goes into the offseason facing surgery and has to think, do I give it one more go? And he does, and it doesn't go well. The Falcons collapsed the year after losing the Super Bowl. Elway gives it one more run, but he's injured. His form looks a lot like Dan Marino's form that year. And that's it.
But they're still a year away from Michael Vick.
Yeah. Meanwhile, with the Broncos, Mike Shanahan's getting the itchy trigger finger on Trent Dilfer.
Because Trent's a passenger.
Yeah, like they're the whole thing is stalling out here. Okay. And
does he take a late round flyer? How crazy do you want to get?
Okay,
he takes a late round flyer.
I want to tell you where I'm going with this.
Okay. Because you know where I'm going.
Well, in 1999, he gets itchy, moves up in the draft, and takes Cade McNown in the first round. Or Cade McNown, sorry. It's obvious within a year or two that McNown isn't the guy. And at this point now, the Broncos are still competitive. It's like that 8 to 10 win competitive. Mike's getting itchy. One thing that hasn't happened is Brian Greasy didn't happen because you had Trent Dilfer, who was younger, coming off of remember, they picked Brian Greasy coming off the Super Bowl.
Right.
Trent Dilfer younger, they don't pick Brian Greasy just yet. They wait a year. That's why I'm saying Cade McNown in 99. So Greasy isn't there and Terrell Davis doesn't get hurt, doesn't tear his ACL. So Terrell Davis is still carrying you to to what you're getting. You're winning 9-11 games, and Terrell Davis is the guy driving you still. And he's starting to climb the charts of the all-time great running backs. But you get to 0-1. McNown isn't the guy. You've moved on from Dilfer. You end up letting Dilfer walk to Baltimore, and they win a Super Bowl with him. So now it's like Dilfer's got rings with 2 different teams as a starter. Oh my God. And it's like, oh shoot, the Broncos screwed up. They let Dilfer go. No, he just knows how to be a passenger pretty well on the bus. Right. And you get to the 0-1 draft, and Jack Elway says, Mike, there's a guy I love.
I got a guy.
And the Broncos draft Drew Brees. And Drew Brees runs Mike Shanahan's offense. And wonderful things happen for the next 20 years. Mike doesn't see all of them, and then eventually they move on from him.
It's Kyle.
But a young Kyle Shanahan replaces Mike Shanahan around 2013, 2014 or so. Drew Brees is the Broncos quarterback for a 20-year run. Mike doesn't lose his job because the Broncos don't go. By the time they do have a stretch where they go 500 for 3 years, but it's after they've won another Super Bowl. It's more recent. So he can withstand that. And we're sitting here right now. Kyle Shanahan is the coach of the Denver Broncos. Who's the quarterback today? Drew Brees retired. What did they do?
Oh, boy. Got Mac Jones.
Oh, God.
The guy Kyle wanted.
But Mac doesn't turn out as badly as he did.
Right. No. Right. Because it's different. It's all about fit.
So what we're saying is, as we're sitting here today, the Broncos, how many Super Bowls do they win with Brees?
Let's put it at 2. Say modest.
Let's say 1 with Mike and 1 with Kyle.
Sure.
So the Broncos still have 3 Super Bowl trophies in their case. 1 with Trent Dilfer and 2 with Drew Brees.
You still got 1 with Steve as well. So it's like if you got Bruce Smith, you would still get a ring for Steve. Now, he might not be as beloved because he wasn't as long tenured.
He's Neil Smith.
Right.
Okay. Right. People still love Neil Smith, but he's not in the Ring of Fame. Steve Atwater, he's DeMarcus Ware a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
A guy who pushed you over the top, but he only plays 3 years. He's not a Ring of Famer. He matters, but he's not in the pantheon. It's Bruce Smith that ends up being like the guy that is beloved.
Wow.
In that way. Bruce plays out his entire career until that plays a final year in Washington. In free agency, he leaves for Dan Snyder's team, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Wow.
It's not a would you rather, but if it worked out that way, Bruce Smith got you Drew Brees for 20 years.
It worked out okay.
Yeah.
It worked out okay.
You're good.
Eventually. In the short, but it's weird to think of John Elway. Like, John Elway's legacy is different because the first thing anybody thinks of him is as an Atlanta Falcon.
Him and Travis Tritt hanging out on the sidelines.
So here's the other layer to it. Of course, John Elway never becomes the GM in Denver. But he doesn't become the GM in Atlanta either. Because the thing that still happens with the Falcons is they still get sold to Arthur Blank. So he doesn't have that in with ownership the way he had in Denver. But what happens to John Elway in his post-playing career is the Elway auto dealership brand becomes massive in the South. Like he basically becomes the king of auto sales in Atlanta.
He's like Dealing Doug
Yes.
in Atlanta, right?
Yes. If you want a car in the Atlanta area, John Elway's your guy.
Wearing a Super Bowl ring in all the commercials, right?
Yes. Like, hey, Atlanta had won nothing before I came along. And he's like, it's wild to think of a universe where John Elway's doing commercials with like Chipper Jones or Greg Maddux or whoever. Oh my gosh.
This is a wild one.
I wonder if we can, we gotta be able to get a graphic where John Elway's wearing a Falcon. You get like a Michael Vick number 7 jersey and you put it on John Elway. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, that would sting the nostrils.
Wow.
Yeah, would be odd.
So the other thing that happens when the Broncos win their first Super Bowl, it's this one's for Bruce. That's what Pat Bolin says.
That's right.
This one's for Bruce. The second one is this. Drew. I don't know if Drew Brees would have played long enough to kind of have the to the second one. The second one is still this one's for you, the fans. And the third one is still this one's for Pat.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not John Elway, of course, accepting the trophy. It's Mike Shanahan who kicks himself upstairs when it's time for Kyle to coach.
Yep.
It's Mike Shanahan saying this one's for Pat.
That would be awesome.
Mm.
With their friendship.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Got chills. I hate to extend this extended show, but I'll say what I wanted. And I said late round. I'll say mid round because there were people that had Tom Brady as a third round. That's where I was going. So you don't have a New England dynasty. You have a Denver dynasty with Mike Shanahan because he didn't get Brian Griese. And who was at Michigan when Brian Griese was at Michigan? Tom Brady. And man, I really wanted Brian. I'm going to get that Tom guy in the third.
See, I think
Brady never goes to New England and he's a dynasty.
Bill Belichick never gets Tom Brady. Bill Belichick's just a guy as a head coach.
Remember, he was the Browns coach, and then he went and ruined New England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because then it's not a couple with Brady.
But then it's
like 6 with Brady.
And it's still the Mike to Kyle transition. That happens.
So Mike gets 3, Kyle gets 3, and you're rolling.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
It's the Michigan thing, man. I couldn't get Brian and give Dill for a little time, whatever. But yeah, I didn't get Brian. You got the backup guy.
Does it end the same way it did for Tom Brady in New England?
Would Mike gets itchy, right?
Does Kyle get itchy? But Mike's the president. President of football operations. And,
right.
Okay, here's what I think happens in that scenario. Brady leaves, but it's a year later.
Okay.
So Tampa Bay doesn't get Tom Brady. And they don't get their Super Bowl with him. It happens a year later because it happens and Mac Jones gets drafted.
There you go.
The Shanahan start watching film and they're like, oh, this Mac Jones kid could run the offense. And that's when they start. Then they make their plan.
Right.
And they let go of Tom Brady, and then Mac Jones takes over and succeeds him in 2021. But he's a direct successor.
Yes.
So how does he handle that pressure?
Not well.
I don't know. So we're sitting here. Okay.
It's a better fit. It is a better fit, but it's Mac Jones, man.
There are questions about how he handles the pressure. So in the 7th round at the end of the 2022 draft, Mike and Kyle Shanahan select Brock Purdy.
Brock Purdy. Wow.
Oh.
And Mike's like, I did it again. You know Mike would, because Mike would take ownership of that Brady pick. I got Brady.
And
I'm the guy. I took him in the 3rd. Everyone said he was a 6th rounder. I took him in the 3rd.
And Brock Purdy is the answer. And the Broncos storm to Super Bowl 58. But they don't see the 49ers. No. They see a young Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers in a rematch of Super Bowl 32. Jordan Love makes some big plays basically Jordan Love makes the plays that Patrick Mahomes made in reality.
Right.
And the Packers beat the Broncos in the Super Bowl.
I just think you would have brought Trent Dilfer back for your pregame speech.
Yeah. Trent Dilfer.
This is weird.
Oh, God.
It's so odd.
And Mike's like, I'm going to bring in somebody who became the first quarterback to win 2 Super Bowls as a starter with 2 different teams. Guys, Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer, Ring of Famer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. Yep. Okay. Bruce Smith. The title was for him. His number gets retired.
Yep.
He becomes the 3rd Bronco to get his number retired. And then Drew Brees gets a number retired for him, obviously. So there are 4 retired numbers now.
Or Tommy Brady. I still
or
like
Tom
the
Brady.
Brady angle. I still
Oh
like
my
the Brady
God.
angle.
Oh. So what we're saying is the Broncos, it works out okay. Eventually.
Yes.
But
not
all
for
this,
John, though. Not for Elway. It does not work out okay for Elway.
Well, I think he's doing all right.
Cars. He's slinging cars. He's fine.
But he doesn't ever get to run a team. Doesn't get to run a team.
Wow. Is Bruce Smith the largest figure in Denver sports then? Because Elway's the king of the mile high. And all due respect to Nikola Jokic, but like.
He is until Brees / Brady come in.
Because quarterback.
Yeah. Because quarterback. Bruce takes on, he's got a place like, that's tough. I'd say kind of like Floyd Little in the franchise's history. Because the other thing, like in this alternate timeline, we just said Terrell Davis doesn't get hurt. So Terrell Davis ends up playing like 10 years.
Oh my God, he's a monster.
In that
Terrell
offense.
Davis, all-time leading rusher in the NFL. Sorry, Emmett.
Wow.
Yep. Remember, the Cowboys are different. The Cowboys are different because of Bruce Smith. Yep.
Yeah, first bout. The Cowboys get 2 titles, but they're not back-to-back.
Not 3.
They don't get 3. They get 2.
This is odd. This is odd.
This is really weird.
And again, I hate to do this to you because this is over an hour show now, but I will say this. I have a place for Elway that it would have worked out differently and better for him. It's a run and shoot team. They had Barry Sanders,
Detroit
Lions. He goes,
but man,
instead with Barry. Wayne Fontes gets a Super Bowl.
Wayne Fontes wins a Super Bowl. Oh my God! Now you've really blown my mind.
Oh, they got Herman Moore, right?
Oh.
They got Barry Sanders, Brett Perriman. And it's the run and shoot.
Yeah,
it's Elway running that in a flipping dome.
John Elway handing off to Barry Sanders.
Woo!
So we're either putting John Elway with Deion Sanders or Barry Sanders.
Right.
And he still gets He gets a ring in both
And
cases.
he's in Detroit, so he's a car guy in Detroit.
Oh, at that point, he's like a frick. Oh, wait. You know what happens? In that case, he does become an executive.
With
It's
the Ford
not
family.
Matt Millen. It's John Elway.
Yes.
And the
Drafting wide receivers.
Lions don't. They don't decline. Like John Elway was great, and then he struggled. Matt Millen was just awful. The Lions don't dive the way they did in the 2000s. They don't go 0-16.
Wow.
And the Lions have a Super Bowl. At least one, maybe two.
Right?
Because maybe Elway puts all the pieces together and the Lions win a Super Bowl. Or maybe one of those, maybe when Drew Brees and Mike Shanahan or Tom Brady and Mike Shanahan make the Super Bowl one year, it's against John Elway's Detroit Lions.
Elway's in their way.
Oh my God. It's like we keep running into this guy.
Right.
Oh.
The alternate realities
Oh my God.
that we open up on this show.
I still think Atlanta was more likely, though.
Atlanta would be fun.
Yeah.
For a while for John. Then it wouldn't be.
Again, and what happens with Dan Reeves? He never goes to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to put him back in Dallas, but Jerry wouldn't have done that because Jerry didn't want anything to do with Tom Landry. It would have been nice for my heart for Dan Reeves to go back to Dallas.
It would, if that had happened, it would have had to wait a few years because it would have probably not been until like after like Dave Campo melted down, but that was when he hired Bill Parcells.
Yeah.
Dan Reeves.
Carolina?
Yeah, instead of George Seifert, Dan Reeves gets the job in 99. And they don't go 1-15 in 01 with him. They kind of have a more sensible build with him.
Did they get Michael Vick? Let's go back.
Ooh.
If Dan Reeves takes them over, does it still Michael Vick and Dan Reeves, but in Carolina?
Yeah. John Fox never becomes the Panthers coach. John Fox takes another route entirely, but he never becomes the Broncos coach either. John Fox's career is entirely different because of this. We've basically we have unraveled the entire league the entire NFL as you know it is different if the Broncos had succeeded in signing Bruce Smith. Where's Mahomes? What happens to the Chiefs? Does Andy Reid come to Kansas City, or is he like, oh, they got that juggernaut there? I'm not sure I'm going to take that on.
Andy Reid gets Paxton Lynch like he wanted. Mahomes goes to Sean Payton
in New Orleans.
So the Broncos are facing Mahomes in the Super Bowl. It's Mike Shanahan and Tommy Brady, Kyle Shanahan and Tommy Brady against Pat Mahomes and the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton.
Who wins?
Probably Mahomes and Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But does Sean Payton last long enough to get Mahomes because he never gets Breeze? In one version. It depends. If it's the Drew Brees thing and Sean Payton gets Breeze, it works out. If the Broncos get Breeze, I don't know. That's where it really gets crazy.
Like we've been on this show. Crazy.
Oh, this was crazy. Oh my God.
I think this was our longest What If episode of all time.
I didn't know where this was going. I had no clue.
I didn't think it'd end up here. Holy cow. We just rewrote league history.
I know. We rewrote Broncos history. If they get Brady, Mike Shanahan, Tom Brady, good God. Oh my God. Mike's already in the Hall of Fame.
Uh-huh.
Think about this. Mike Shanahan with Tom Brady. He's like the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
He's got 7 Super Bowl rings. 8 if you count, because he still won one as a coordinator, because the Niners get it in 92, not the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
He's the greatest head coach of all time.
Yep. He is. He's the greatest, maybe not greatest like football person, because he kicks himself upstairs, and then Kyle Shanahan keeps doing the same thing. And Mike looks on proudly, and the Broncos are this dynasty. And man. Who's the owner of the Broncos? I'm going to give you one.
Okay.
Give me one. I think as they keep winning Super Bowls, there's less infighting in the Bolin family. I think the Bolin family still owns the team.
Okay.
For now. I think eventually they sell just because of the costs that are coming in.
Right.
But I think today the Bolin family still owns the Broncos. Because winning, as John Madden says, is a great deodorant.
Cures everything.
And a lot of the squabbles don't matter quite as much. And they make it work.
Mm-hmm.
The family has figured something out in terms of succession, in terms of managing partner and everything. And they still have the team today.
All due respect to Steve, but there's a lot of fans that would pick this. Steve still gets his ring here too.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of fans that would pick this.
Steve actually gets more rings out of this. We've got him winning 3 with the 49ers. Steve gets 4 rings, 1 in Denver, 3 in San Francisco, 89, 90, and 92. Steve's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like it's done with the Broncos and he retires. He goes back to San Francisco, retires a 49er. He's in at the first opportunity. He doesn't have to wait. He's a fan. He becomes a fan ambassador, franchise ambassador for the 49ers. Oh gosh. That hurts.
I know.
He basically becomes in San Francisco what he was here.
Yep.
Just a beloved touchstone of the franchise. The other thing, of course, that may happen is like a lot of guys out there that did well because the team was based in Santa Clara, right in the center of all things tech. A lot of prominent players from those 49er teams got very, very rich. They got hooked up with tech, got in some venture capital, and then like there are a lot of incredibly wealthy ex-49ers from that era. Yeah, and Steve would have gotten on that train as well, I bet.
It requires magical thinking, and why not, Mace, on this super extended show? I wanted to show you this from this highlight, or excuse me, which one was it? Was it this one, or was it this one? No, it must have been the first one. No successor for Rozelle in sight. See that right there in the middle?
Uh-huh.
I say magical thinking because of this. And around this time, at a bar called the Providence, there was a bartender who was in law school that when he would schlep drinks to people and they'd be like, well, what are you doing? You know, I'm in law school. What do you want to do after law school? And he would say, I'm going to be the commissioner in the NFL. His name, Roger Goodell. So when people would make fun, because imagine sitting down at a bar and some bartender is like, oh, I'm just doing this on the side. I'm in law school.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing after law school? I want to be commissioner in the NFL. You'd be like, get out of here.
Yeah.
His name was Roger Goodell.
Wasn't Goodell chauffeuring people around like in his early NFL days, basically, like, you know, making airport runs and that kind of thing? Yeah.
Doing whatever.
Yeah.
Bill Belichick did laundry.
Yep.
You know?
Did laundry, cut up film.
Yep.
For the Broncos.
Yep.
Wow.
What a massive show.
This one we just unravel the entire NFL.
Mm-hmm.
As The entire NFL, as we know, it's completely different. Except somehow Jordan Love's still the Packers quarterback, but I think the Packers are still taking their quarterback path. I don't know if it's that affected by it, because part of it also is when you look at the timeline, Mike Shanahan replaced Mike Holmgren as offensive coordinator in San Francisco. So that's what I mean when I say that timeline probably goes very similarly to the reality timeline there. In terms, maybe details are different, but I think their overall success probably remains the same. So that's why I'll say it'll probably still be Jordan Love in the Super Bowl.
Well, we would love it if you would help us out on YouTube. Comment below. This is a super big show. Thank you guys for watching. But comment down below on what you think of this. But Mace, how can people help us out on YouTube?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss a vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's a BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.